Around 3 months after she got illegally pregnant with her inbred brat-to-be, they left her alone with Kaiser Adolf for a few hours of fake engagement time. She sat at the dinner table just out of reach of him through the cell bars and waited for him to start a conversation with her. He ignored her as she was clearly disturbed. She then abruptly stated, in a somewhat insincere-sounding way, that she did not really want to have the baby anymore. Got up and went to find a knitting needle. She sat back down at the dinner table outside his cell and proceeded to insert the knitting needle in herself, between her legs, whilst seated just out of fingertip reach of the Kaiser through the bars. She then implied he should lunge at her through the bars to try to stop her pushing it further in, as it may harm the gestating fetus, without him understanding what she meant. When he didn't move, she pushed the needle in further. She then paused and seemed to be making suggestions as to what noises he should make, as well as some noises of self-caused distress. He ignored her. She persisted with the same process, implying he should scream and run over to the bars and try to stop her by reaching out through the bars with his hands. She made suggestions on what noises he should make, whilst making some noise herself caused by what she was doing. Whilst she sat at the table pushing the needle further in, pausing to see if he moved, she pushed the needle far enough in to abort the child. The child aborted whilst she was sitting at the dinner table, making garbled noises of self-caused distress, combined with suggestions to the Kaiser. When the child fully aborted, she dumped it on top of the dinner table she was sitting at, left it there, and tried to clean herself. She then wiped the small, aborted object clean with a cloth, and moved it to a second table with a raised circular feature. She placed it in the center of the feature. Then went to the bathroom to wash herself off. When the others working at the makeshift jail came back, she lied and told them it had incidentally aborted and there was nothing she could do about it. Claiming she crossed her legs as hard as she could, but could not prevent the miscarriage. They spent a week or two in a distressed panic, accusing Kaiser Adolf of doing something wrong, took photos of the aborted fetus, and threw it in the garbage. They decided not to tell anyone outside the jail, waiting for Kaiser Adolf to be dragged to Berlin like a chained prisoner, with Sadie and her child being politely escorted along as if the new royal family pair, that there would never be a baby. They decided it might spoil anyone involved with the Neo-Natzis fun. They also thought it would have stopped them rolling their eyes back in their heads, thinking about what they thought might happen when the child was 18, in 18 years' time, and pretending to own my Hohenzollern Royal Family estate for the hideously evil Einstein siblings. They then violently victimized Kaiser Adolf in his cell, claiming to check if they could find a way to get a viable sperm out of him to attempt another pregnancy. Always checking under a microscope to see if they could find one. It was pointless violence, as they had already confirmed him as rendered chemically infertile in January 1944. After Sadie had gotten pregnant with his stolen sperm, and before they let him regain full consciousness for the first time in over 6 weeks. They regularly filmed Kaiser Adolf being assaulted during pretend experiments to try to get a viable sperm out of him. The footage has been seen by millions over the years, most people almost completely unaware of what they saw. More recently, graphic footage of him being assaulted during those pointless acts of violence has been converted to look like computer game footage people may be familiar with. Including computer game footage where Kaiser Adolf was left as the character Adolf Hitler for the game or film animation that used the footage. There are a large number of photographs as well. After they gave up on the idea of getting a viable sperm out of him, they charged people admission to see him in his cell through one-way mirrors installed in the walls of the room his prison cage was in. The jail was in a converted underground subway-style train station building. The area where the trains were supposed to run through near the station itself had no tracks installed, was lit by skylights, and was walled off from the constructed station. One-way mirrors were installed in the walls between where the tracks should have been, and the platform the passengers would have used. If people paid to go in, they could walk down where the tracks should have been, look to find the words Adolf Hitler with an arrow pointed at a window, written in novelty oversized Yugoslavian crayon. Then look at him through the one-way mirror installed like a window to see him in his cell, chained up using a pulley system. Still wearing the formal dinner clothes he was abducted in, December 1943, with his top hat on the floor usually. Kaiser Adolf Hitler the Hohenzollern escaped the jail cell in the converted subway station in 1959. His escape occurred when crazy prisoner Governor Joe Rewald shot himself, whilst forcing Kaiser Adolf to play Russian gun roulette with him at gunpoint. Joe had been on a murderous rampage earlier that day, very drunk, that resulted in him killing dozens of people before he arrived at work. Including everyone in his extended family, except his teenage son Rowdy, who was away at a military-themed camp. When Joe arrived at work he shot every other member of staff at the jail dead, leaving only him and Kaiser Adolf. He forced the Kaiser to play gun roulette with him, insisting the Kaiser take the first turn. Then shot himself through the head on his own first turn. Sadie Einstein was away visiting her daughter that existed before Kaiser Adolf was abducted that day. That one remaining child of Joe ended up being the biological father of one of 4 females who pretended to be my older sisters after I was born. She had been illegally registered to my father Kevin and his wife after being born in 1961, as if my parents' child, and was growing up in my household when I was born. She was born less than 2 years after her grandfather Joe shot himself, which allowed Kaiser Adolf to escape prisoner of war jail in 1959. After the inbred baby plan had failed in April 1944, due to Sadie Einstein self-aborting the fetus at around 3 months, people waiting for her and the child in Germany were expecting them to arrive in Berlin sometime between November 1944 and the end of the year. They were pretending she was going to become their equivalent of Queen by marriage of Germany temporarily, until Kaiser Adolf was executed and the baby made pretend infant Kaiser. They were behaving as if it was a done deal. They were also destroying banknotes, coins, and stamps with members of my royal Hohenzollern family on them, as if preparing for the images to be replaced with the inbred brat, Sadie, and her completely irrelevant brother Albert Einstein, who would have been the inbred child's uncle. Some even prepared mock-ups of the 3 together, depicting the baby with 7 fingers on each hand, and 3 eyes to look like it could be stamped on a new royal-themed coin. They still have them in some cases. There was a bit of a problem though. At the same time people had started pretending Sadie Einstein was becoming the equivalent of Queen of Germany, others were faking Janet Podolsky using the false name Eva Braun to look like Kaiser Adolf's then current sexual partner, cum fiancé. His girlfriend sweetheart back to when she was 16 and got pregnant with his stolen sperm. Implying that if they got married as Kaiser and fiancé, she would therefore become the Kaiser's spouse and princess by implication in the fictional story. The Lunatics equivalent of Queen of Germany, too. The same as they were planning to pretend with Sadie Einstein if she arrived back in Berlin with the inbred baby that had already been aborted. There were 2 groups claiming to be in the same terrorism group, the Neo-Nazis, claiming 2 separate fictional stories were going to result in 2 separate women becoming the equivalent of Queen of Germany by implication and extended implication. Sadie Einstein and Janet Podolsky using the false name Eva Braun. Sadie's extortion plot brat had been self-aborted by her in Yugoslavia in April 1944, but the Neo-Nazis weren't told that. Nobody outside of the jail staff knew. Janet had the firstborn baby to my great-grandfather's stolen sperm in 1907 and named it Donna Podolsky, my grandmother. Janet's granddaughter, Judith Margaret Jugashvili, was my mother. Judith was born in 1940 to Iosif Stalin Jugashvili and his 3rd wife, Donna. Judith was born before Kaiser Adolf's abduction, and therefore before there was such a thing as a neo-Nazi. Judith had therefore become a possibility under German constitutional monarchy law to have a future technically eligible child, under the Hohenzollern Royal Family great-grandchild rule, without her father Iosif knowing it. It turned out to be me in the end in 1972. Brian Webb.